Well, welcome back to another edition of our Dailyish Devotional. Pastor Brian, if you don't know who I am, or you might know me by another name, Bruce Wayne, because I'm Batman. I figured you've noticed the backdrop. You've also noticed that I might be dressed a bit differently than I have been in the past. So either I am Batman, and this is my billionaire clothes that I usually wear around in disguise, or my youngest son was complaining a bit that we hadn't used any of his backgrounds yet, and we dug this comforter out of his closet, and I had to work for the funeral home this morning, and just decided to stay dressed up to do the Dailyish Devotional. So, either I'm Gotham's protector at night, or just stay dressed up and working this morning. Either way, we have a wonderful chapter to go through in Max's book. Before we get there, I found this cartoon that I thought was hilarious. It made me chuckle when I saw it. Not maybe it'd make you chuckle too. We're going to go through the seventh chapter here in Max's book, He Chose the Nails, and it's a great chapter. It's a bit of a longer chapter because it's got more of a story that he tells through it rather than some Bible study. And I'm not going to be able to share the whole story with you because you don't want me just to read into the camera. This could be boring enough to having me just read a story to you. But I'm hoping to be able to get kind of the gist of the story and then a little bit about a reminder what the chapter title is about when it's about I will not abandon you. I don't think there's much more of an appropriate title and subject that we could talk about today, especially as we continue to go through these difficult times. So let's dive into Max's chapter, I Will Not Abandon You. He basically tells a story that mirrors the story of the prodigal son. It's a story of a man and a daughter growing up and then a tradition of dancing together every Christmas Eve before the family came over for the big party. The daughter's mom, her dad's wife, obviously, had died at childbirth, so he was forced to raise his daughter alone. And he was a butcher in Minnesota. When she turned 17, the super rebellious stage began, and she was quiet and shunned her dad and didn't want anything to do with him. Pretty typical teenage behavior. But then she takes it a step further, and she leaves him. She takes off with a boyfriend, ends up, in a state far away, ends up, of course, dumped by the boyfriend on her own, broke, living in a homeless shelter, resorting to some not so reputable ways to make some money, and she continues to get letters from her dad that she will not open. Finally, she gets one that isn't postmarked. It's dropped off at the table in the little dressing room at her place of employment. She finally opens it and realizes that her dad has been sending her the same question over and over again, where he just asked her if she would come home and dance with him again. She finally, of course, in the story, after receiving that last letter, goes home and hangs her head and says, was the invitation still valid? And her dad, of course, hugs her and they dance and all is well. A couple points here. The first point, of course, is that God never abandons or leaves us. That's the point of the prodigal son. And we talked about yesterday where we can choose to ignore God, and God loves us enough to honor that choice. And we can always come back to God, and God will be waiting for us, like the father was in the prodigal son. He didn't chase after his son who chose to leave, but he was happy and glad when his son came back and welcomed him with open arms, just as in the story that Max has in the 7th chapter where the father welcomed his daughter back. No matter what she had done, he welcomed her back with open arms. He would never abandon her completely. It's a real powerful story. I can't do any justice reading it to you now. So if you have a chance to get Max's book, He Chose the Nails, it is a wonderful story that he talks about. But in it, Max makes a point that I had never thought of. Again, seems like Max is pretty good at reminding us of things that I don't always remember. He talks about pride and shame. He said, you never know they were sisters. They appear so different. Pride puffs out her chest, shame hangs her head. Pride boasts, shame hides. Pride seeks to be seen, shame seeks to be avoided. But don't be fooled. The emotions have the same parentage, and the emotions have the same impact. They keep you from your father. Pride says you're too good for him. Shame says you're too bad for him. Pride drives you away. Shame keeps you away. If pride is what goes before the fall, then shame is what keeps you from getting up after one. I had never thought of those two emotions being so closely related. I think a lot of times of my relationship with God and how when things are going well, I seem to not have much time or need to talk to God as much, or hardly at all. But if, of course, things start to fall apart a little bit, or I see some tough times on the horizon, all of a sudden, I need to reconnect with God and ask questions, or not ask questions, but reconnect. And I want God's help and assistance. And soon as things go back to being good, I can kind of push God away again. It's kind of that up and down roller coaster. I don't know if you've ever experienced that with your faith relationship. Or even sometimes I've pushed God away for so long that I don't want to go back. I don't want to build that relationship again or work on it because I feel like God will be angry with me. I was reading stories on the internet of kids doing shameful things, and one kid had spilled wine on the carpet, and they decided to put a pillow and just lay on top of the pillow forever to never, of course, have to tell mom and dad about the wine that was spilled on the carpet. And never mind the logic of eventually they got to get up, but the parent, of course, was so mad that they used the pillow to cover it up rather than telling them about the wine right away, because then we have a stained pillow and the stained carpet, probably both ruined. Or if they just would have came clean right away, things would have been easier. Something I tell my kids all the time: if you mess up, let me know, because lying about it and me finding out later are going to make things much, much worse. How many times have we seen examples of grown-ups, adults, where the lie and the cover-up is always worse than the first sin? And I think that's what God is reminding us too. God continually shows us and reminds us that He will never abandon us. Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid or terrified because of them. For the Lord your God goes with you. He will never leave you nor forsake you. Yet that shame of our actions a lot of times keeps us from God, or even keeps us from reconciling with other people, thinking they'll never take me back after what I've done, that what I've done can never be forgiven, or I am not worthy. Or the flip side, going to pride: I'm too good for that person. I don't need them right now. I don't need God right now. Things are going well. Both of them have the desire to, or the same effect of keeping us from that relationship, either with God or that person. And that can do great damage. So I thought about, are there people in my life where I have stopped reaching out because either I believe I'm too good for them, which, man, sounds terrible to say out loud, or are there people in my life that I have stopped seeking a relationship with because I'm ashamed of what I've done, or don't believe they will take me back for things that I have done or not done to them in the past? Think about that for a second. I wouldn't encourage saying it out loud because it doesn't feel so good. People I don't want to have a relationship with because I believe I am too good for them. Ugh. But I'm sure I have suffered that sin and will in the future. But how about a relationship with God? During these times, it's probably easy to think, I need God, we need God, obviously. But how about when times get better? Because they will get better. Will you be as earnest in keeping that relationship and seeking this connection? Or will it be simply going back to life as normal? Or on the other side, where you're too ashamed from what your past is or what you've done, where you can't. God can't possibly love you anymore. Max talks in his book about the most famous road, and it is the Via Dolorosa. You know, if I were prepared better, I'd have the chapter right here that I would know it. There it is. The Via Dolorosa, the Way of Sorrows. According to tradition, it's the route Jesus took from Pilate's Hall to Calvary. Of course, we don't know for sure that's the way Jesus went. But Max says the real journey started in heaven, when God decided to reconcile us through His Son Jesus. And the path to the cross is God saying just how far He would go for that reconciliation, bearing everything on His way to the cross and up through His death on the cross. So there's nothing you can do that God will be too ashamed to bring you back. Reach out to friends you need to. Reach out to God again. welcome and be welcomed in God's arms. Amen.